It's August 2008 in North London. A 16-year-old boy says goodbye to his friend at their house and heads home to Islington. It's an easy, familiar journey that is done many times. That boy was Alexander or Alex Sloley. But on that summer day, he would simply vanish into thin air, leaving his family with an agony of unanswered questions. What happened to Alex Sloley? Today we're looking at the story of Alex Sloley. That story is dark enough on its own, but there are aspects that get even darker. Less than a year earlier, another teenage boy, Andrew Gosden, had also vanished into thin air in London. Both were very bright students and both were teenagers. Both disappeared in the same city, namely London, and to this day neither case has been solved. So as we go through, we'll ask ourselves, what happened to Alex? Did he run away? Did he fall victim to an accident? Or was he targeted by someone who knew exactly how to make someone disappear? We're going to ask ourselves, is there actually a connection to the Gosden case? Because this raises the disturbing possibility that in London of the late 2000s, there was a predator on the loose who has never been caught. So to try and understand this mystery, first of all, we need to know a little bit more about Alex. He was born on August the 4th, 1991. He grew up in North London, and among friends and family, he was known by the nickname Gog. Now, this was probably due to the fact that he wore fairly distinctive spectacles or glasses. Alex wasn't some troubled runaway or a kid even on the verge of getting into serious problems. In fact, he was known for being extremely stylish. He took a lot of care with how he dressed. And he seemed to have his life together, even at age 16. People who knew him would describe him as always smart, never scruffy, and he was scrupulous about his personal hygiene. He was a young man who set himself standards and kept to them. He initially studied at Islington Arts and Media School, but he eventually moved on to City and Islington College. He was bright, motivated and socially active. He had many interests and ambitions, but like many teenagers of that age, he was still trying to work out exactly what he wanted to do in life. He did, however, have a great affinity for mathematics, and one of his possible aspirations was almost to follow in the footsteps of his mother, Nerissa Teavey. She was a bookkeeper, and his aspiration was to become an accountant. Outside of college, Alex was just a normal teenager. Like many teenagers, he had passions and habits that grounded him both in life and in his family culture. He loved football, but one of his other passions was food, particularly traditional West Indian food. Alex's family life was fairly stable, but it wasn't without challenges. By this stage, his mother Nerissa and his father Christopher had separated. He had 3 sisters, all younger. These were Tasha, Tazra and Latina. He was very protective of them. He always took an interest in what they were doing at school. Whenever they came home, he would ask them how their day had been, and he was always on the watch for them being bullied. He took his role as big brother very seriously. Although separated from his mother, his father Christopher was still in his life. By the summer of 2008, Alex was about to turn 17. He stood on the threshold between adolescence and adulthood. He had friends, he had his family, and he had a birthday celebration coming up very shortly. Everything pointed towards a future which should for him have been full of possibilities. And then came Saturday, August the 2nd, 2008, the day Alex disappeared. On the morning of August the 2nd, Alex was staying at a friend's house in Edmonton, which is a suburb of North London. He'd actually stayed overnight, which on the face of it appeared unplanned because he'd not even taken a change of clothing with him. Around noon, he decided to leave and head home. His plan was simple. He wanted to get back to Islington. His birthday was 2 days away, and he wanted to make sure he had everything squared for the celebration that day. As I mentioned at the start, it wasn't a long or a complicated journey, just a walk across North London, one he'd made many times before. But Alex never made it home. and later that evening alarm bells started to ring in his mother Nerissa's head. She called his friend in Edmonton to ask whether Alex was still there, and his friend said no, he left hours earlier. He should have been home by now. I thought nothing else of it. And at that stage, Alex's mother began to panic, and she decided that if he didn't return home soon, she would have to involve the police. Well, Alex didn't show, and eventually she contacted the Metropolitan Police and registered a missing persons report. And from that moment onwards, it appeared that Alex Sloley had simply vanished into thin air. Police would later comment that the disappearance was completely out of character for this young lad. According to his mother, this wasn't a boy who was known for running off or staying out of touch at any stage. His family immediately knew that something was very wrong. To begin with, there was a slight suggestion that Alex might have been worried by an incident which had taken place earlier in 2008. Now, for reasons which I'm not clear on, he'd been driving a vehicle which didn't belong to him somewhere in North London. He was actually pulled over by police and given a ticket for driving underage. He was told that because of this offence he'd probably have to attend court, but as far as I'm aware, this didn't occur before he disappeared. Now, this was eventually discounted by police as a reason for his disappearance. And so when investigators started their search, the trail was ice cold. There was hardly any CCTV, no evidence that he'd got on a bus or a train, and there were no witnesses who recalled seeing him on the streets between Edmonton and Islington. He was just a boy who walked out of a house and never reached his destination. As one officer put it, it's like he just disappeared off the face of the earth. The initial search brought little progress. Police combed through what CCTV footage there was without success. It was as if Alex stepped into some form of blind spot that never ended. Now, approximately a year later, in September 2009, police had a report of a possible sighting. Someone had reported possibly seeing Alex in Ilford, which is a region of East London, but this sighting was never confirmed. Around about the same time, Alex's case took on a unique form of publicity. The charity called Missing People, in concert with the supermarket chain Iceland, started a campaign to help find Alex. They placed his photograph on some 13.5 million milk cartons. It was one of the first efforts of its kind in the UK, a way of placing a missing person's face in front of households throughout the country. It was a method that had previously been used in the United States. For a time, Alex's smile was everywhere, looking out from the refrigerated aisles of supermarkets and staring at people from their breakfast tables. But sadly, in spite of all this, nobody came forward with any information that could shed light on the case. Years later, Alex's mother made a shocking discovery while she was being interviewed regarding the case. During this interview, she learned that police had received numerous reports of sightings. Now, these were back in 2009, and they were sightings that she'd never been informed about. She was absolutely devastated. How could information that important have been kept from her? She questioned, could following up on all of these leads more vigorously have made a difference? Now, that lack of communication deepened her mistrust of the entire investigation, and it added yet another layer of pain for her. By 2019, obviously more than a decade had passed. But in an effort to find Alex, the Metropolitan Police issued what they call an age-progressed photograph, which they thought would show him as he might look at age 28. And alongside that release, they also gave some chilling information. In all the years that had passed, Alex's national insurance number, his bank account, and his phone had never been used. For investigators, that gave a clear sign. Wherever Alex might be, he wasn't trying to live a normal existence just under the radar. Detective Constable Tom Boone from the Missing Persons Unit stated what they thought was the obvious. There were no major leads, no breakthroughs. The case had gone completely cold. Now, when someone vanishes without a trace, we are forced to consider what the possibilities are. Firstly, did he run away? Some people suggest that Alex might have just chosen to disappear. But this seems unlikely. He had very little money with him, he had no spare clothes, no passport, and there was no indication of him wanting to leave his family behind. The previous day he'd said goodbye to them perfectly normally, not like it was the last time. And let's remember, his 17th birthday was just 2 days away. Why would he just vanish of his own accord at that moment with no hint of problem or upset? The second possibility is that some accident befell him. Could he have just been injured somewhere and never been found? London is a massive city, but it's also heavily populated and heavily monitored. It's one of the most surveilled cities in the world. So the idea that he could suffer an accident and not be discovered seems fairly unlikely to me. And the last possibility, sadly, is foul play. And this is the possibility that a lot of people find very difficult to confront. However, it is a theory that fits the unsettling lack of evidence. So we're forced to question, did Alex cross paths with someone who intended him harm? Someone who was capable of making a teenage boy just vanish without leaving any physical trace or any digital footprint. Now that theory perhaps gains more weight when we consider another disappearance that shook London and indeed the entire country less than a year earlier. That boy was, of course, Andrew Gosden. Andrew was just 14 years old when he disappeared in London in September 2007. Andrew Gosden was last seen on CCTV at King's Cross Station. After that, nothing. In a similar way, there were no confirmed sightings, no bank activity and no contact with family. Andrew also seemed to just vanish into thin air. Now, for comparison purposes, let's lay the cases side by side. In terms of age, Andrew Gosden was 14, Alex was 16. Both were academically bright. Andrew was a gifted mathematics student, and Alex also had a pronounced interest and quite a prowess in mathematics. As for the location of their disappearances, Andrew's last known sighting was at King's Cross. Now, Alex was believed to be heading towards Islington, which is less than 2 miles from King's Cross. So both of them disappeared in London fairly close together, leaving pretty much no trace on CCTV. And in terms of the aftermath of the disappearances, there were no bank activities, no contact with family, no passport usage, and their mobile phones had gone silent. So what do you think? Do you find the similarities haunting? In 2017, retired detective Mick Neville, who was the former head of the Metropolitan Police's Central Images Unit, publicly raised the question, could these two cases be linked? He noted the similarities between the cases, and he asked bluntly, was there a serial killer on the prowl in London? He said that the potential links between the cases needed to be recognised and investigated. Now, that kind of statement doesn't come lightly from a former senior police officer. And Neville wasn't stating categorically that both of the boys had fallen foul of the same offender. He was just highlighting what many observers already felt, and that was that the coincidences were just too strong to ignore. If Alex and Andrew were both targeted, it raises terrifying possibilities. Could there have been someone operating in London, seeking out teenage boys, luring them somewhere and then ensuring that they left no trace behind? Now, this would be someone who was skilled at hiding in plain sight. Someone who knew how to avoid witnesses, the many CCTV cameras that are around London, and digital footprints. Now, it's speculation, yes, I know. But in the absence of firm evidence, speculation is all the families have. Of course, there are many differences too. Andrew appeared to have chosen to go to London. Alex, on the other hand, left his friend's house in the morning with no major resources, money, anything like that, no seemingly overt plan, and every intention of coming home to his family. So while the outcomes to these disappearances seem eerily similar, the lead-ups to them are not. But the question remains, did two boys just vanish in London less than a year apart by sheer coincidence? Or is there a darker thread connecting them both? It's now been 17 years since Alex Sloley walked out of that house in Edmonton and completely vanished. 17 birthdays missed, 17 Christmases with an empty chair at the table, and 17 years of questions that just have no answers. For his mother, Narissa, every day is still a battle. She has spoken many times about the everyday agony of not knowing. of waking up each morning with the same questions in her head that she went to bed with the night before. Where is her son? Is he still alive? Did somebody hurt him? Is he somewhere thinking about his home and his family? For Alex's sisters, the silence is just as painful. Their brother should have been there for family milestones. He should have just been there for ordinary family moments, and for the kind of laughter and arguments that bind siblings together. Instead, they just had memories of him, frozen in time. And for Alex's father, Christopher, the pain became permanent. He sadly passed away in 2014, never knowing what had happened to his son. He carried that unanswered question to his grave. And to this day, police continue to list Alex Sloley as a missing person. The official stance from them is cautious. There is no evidence of harm, but there's also no evidence of survival either. And yet we must remember, a cold case doesn't necessarily mean a closed case. And that's because Alex Sloley was not a statistic. He was a friend, he was a son, and he was a brother. He was a teenager with dreams, style, a laugh, and a future. And that future was stolen, it seems, in some as yet unknown way. Now, until the day his family gets some answers, Alex's story demands to be told, just like Andrew Gosden's. His name demands to be remembered, and his face needs to be seen. And that's because behind every missing person's photo, there isn't just a mystery. There is a life, and that life mattered. Now, if you found this story as haunting as I did, please take a moment possibly to like the video and share it. And I'm asking that not for some YouTube algorithm or for me. I'm asking because awareness matters. Stories like Alex's fade too easily into silence. And the more people that hear the story, then there's a higher possibility of gaining some answers. But do tell me, what do you think happened to Alex? Do you think this case could be linked to that of Andrew Gosden? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all because they're important. And your perspectives might just spark a new conversation that keeps the cases alive. And so, on that final note, until next time, I'll ask you to stay curious and stay safe. And never forget that behind every missing person, there's a family hoping and praying for them to come home. Thank you for watching.